So David Marcello, jointly with me and so many others, friends of Larry Eustis, who in the middle of spring, and it really is spring out there, passed on. And so I think I think I'd like to pass in spring too, is kind of what I'm saying. It's a time of renewal. It's a time of things growing again. And what better a time in a way to um, start something new, whatever that may be out there. Um, so it's appropriate in particular for Larry Eustace because he is such a rounded, robust, smart, caring, all kinds of good things person. Um, you've known him, I think the two of us have known him almost about the same length of time, which is how many years?
About right, Gene. I met him in 1968, and I think you probably encountered him around that time as well.
72. I'm 72.
Okay, a few years
Exactly.
later.
So pretty
Yeah.
close. Um, let's talk a little bit since there's been a couple articles in the paper already, but tell me your personal experience with him. What about him was important to you?
Well, I'm going to come back to this theme repeatedly as we talk, and that is Larry's connection with people. He was deeply interested in what other people had to say. And of course, that's a wonderful way to establish relationships with other people. And Larry had wonderful relationships with lots of different people. So, my wife, Jane, says Larry was interested in what I had to say. And that's a great threshold for a lot of wonderful friendships. Um, Larry was introduced to me by two people that you and I have known going back many years, Kendall and Kathy Vick. And I
Oh,
could tell when they introduced him to me, they thought he was pretty special. And they were right. Larry was. And, I was privileged to have a relationship with him going back over now 5 or 6 decades, 68 to 24. You do the math. If we were younger and more astute, we could figure it out for ourselves. But Larry was a wonderful personality. He occupied a quite privileged position in New Orleans. Ed Renwick, who ran the Institute of Politics, used to keep a list of people who were notable in different areas. And that list, as I recall, was business, politics, media, and social standing. Larry checked all of those boxes, but the great thing about Larry was he never allowed that to get in the way of authentic relationships with a lot of different people. I mean, this was in many ways Larry's greatest superpower. He valued people, and his relationships with them were as genuine as could be. I mean, when you were in Larry's presence, he was fully present for you. He was interested
I
in
didn't
what
think of
you
that
had to say.
before, but yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. So, he's a wonderful fellow to have had a relationship with over these many years. And it is always a sad moment when people pass on. But Larry had a rich, rewarding life. And I think he would want that to be our memory of who he was. And he enjoyed it.
And I think for certain people, our memory of them is so clear and strong
Right?
that in a way they're not gone. I mean,
Yep.
I when I think of my life in New Orleans, it's hard for me to think of it without Larry. So,
Yep.
I mean, he was just so much a part of it in
Was.
so many different instances as you described. So, um, you know, he's kind of still part of the landscape on some level. Um,
An amazing thing about Larry is he suffered some serious health consequences probably 20 or 30 years ago. And despite that, he went on with an appreciation of life. Um, Typically for Larry, he never whined about the physical challenges that were inflicted upon him. He fought back in a way with a tough-minded recovery program. He did physical therapy, he did speech therapy, even dancing in the most recent years. And I think that's indication of the sort of character that Larry had. He was ready to continue to encounter life. I would occasionally suggest that I bring lunch by the house, and he would say, you know, as long as he could, let's go out. And so we did many, many times,
Hmm.
even when the walker was an essential part of the landscape.
Right. Um, of all the things that this is a tough question, I know, because it would be hard for me to answer it, but of all the experiences that you had with him and the things that you learned from him, can you isolate something about what you learned from your relationship with him that um, you would say is one of the most important things, ways that he had an impact on you?
Well, let me talk about one instance that I think sort of frames Larry's involvement in political matters. And that has to do with an event that took place very early on. I mean, most of the people in New Orleans knew Larry as a fully formed civic leader, as a successful businessman, and as a political mover and shaker. He was involved in a lot of political campaigns. He managed to raise a lot of money for people running for office, the mother's milk of politics. But what I like to remember is that even from his youngest days, Larry was always committed to political reform. And the example that I'll use of that has to do with a retreat in 1971 when a multiracial group of progressive young folks took ourselves off to a Girl Scout camp in Bunkie. Um, our objective being to organize the Louisiana Coalition for New Politics. There were about 50 or 60 of us. We came from Shreveport and Monroe and New Orleans and Lafayette and all around the state. And we met all day. And on a particular evening, we decided, well, let's go out and celebrate. So we piled into the back of a pickup truck and took a nighttime ride about around Bunkie. And it was a remarkable evening. I mean, blue jean jackets were in evidence. I remember Bob Tucker wearing one. And Kumbaya was in the air. Well, we all survived it. The Louisiana Coalition for New Politics did not. But I think it's instructive that that was Larry at a very early age thinking we can be involved in politics and we can make things better. And so, you know, before he was a businessman and a mover and shaker in politics, he was a young person like most of us at one point or another are, who was committed to political reform. And that was part of what motivated him throughout his life.
So that right now is something that a lot of us are decrying the absence of, right?
Right,
We
right,
are, we're concerned about all generations, but in particular, you're hearing more and more concern about where our young people are.
right.
And we wouldn't blame our young people for 1 second for being um, really disappointed in experiencing a world that is pretty dark and difficult. It's certainly the most difficult period of my life that I
Right.
have been living in, and I think you would say that,
Yep.
and most people would say that, and it's bad for us because we've experienced better. But imagine young people who are coming up and they are faced with this world of gotcha politics, of power plays, of just literally caring more about just being in power than what you do with the power. You just want the power.
Yep.
In too many cases, we have we could go on with that list. So I'm very concerned about what we have to do to have something like that hayride you had. I don't know if you called it a hayride, the Coalition for New
Right.
Politics. What do we have to do?
Well, I'm going to share with you my theory. It's as much a hope as it is a prediction. I think it skipped a generation. I came to political consciousness in the 1960s, and it seemed like a yeasty time with major changes happening, and that was accurate enough. And that motivated me for a lot of years to stay involved in political change. I don't know that that characterized the generation that followed us. I know you shared some of that same enthusiasm, but I think there is more of that out in the globe these days than there has been for a lot of years. I mean, there are a lot of young people that are awfully concerned about climate change, the issues of the day. And so I'm encouraged to think that whatever legacy of political engagement characterized our lives in the 1960s might be part of the scene that we're entering into right now.
So I have a saying that I use to reassure myself that things are going to get better. I often say the worse things get, the greater the chances for change.
Right.
Because if it gets bad enough, you got to do something about it.
We thought in the 1960s that the revolution was arriving. It was actually the counter revolution for 20 years thereafter.
It was a mix. We had a moment. We had a moment of a feeling of escape from the McCarthy period of the 50s. Those of us who could go back that far, and there was this kind of exhilaration about the kind of the hippie element of the political scene. It
Mhm.
did help foster energy for a lot of people and to get involved and make things happen. I hope that that's true now. That in fact, as things are, I don't know that they're deteriorating, but they're pretty bad. They don't have to deteriorate much to be pretty bad. So that maybe this does mean that we could conceivably move the pendulum the other way. Now, did you happen to read the Raging Cajuns?
I did.
Did you? So
Yeah.
today it was in the New York
Maureen
Times.
Dowd, I think, a couple of days ago. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was that he was not happy at
Right.
all about the way things are going, and you would have expected him to be a little bit more on this side of it has to get better, but he was really a little bit. Maybe it was just having a moment, but he was saying this ain't good.
Right. He was. He was. Well, if you looked at the video that was embedded in the middle of that Maureen Dowd column, it was Rob Reiner talking to James Carville about what might happen in the next 6 months. And Carville was, I think, pretty realistic. He was talking about poll numbers that were not encouraging. This was a conversation that took place after Joe Biden's State of the Union address, which I thought was really superb. I do not
Yeah,
think
it was amazing.
a better speech. But it hadn't made much difference. I mean, the poll numbers have not changed. And Carville's message was that um, the Democratic Party needs to take a real hard and serious look at whether, given a lot of other alternatives, strong candidates within the ranks of the party, it makes sense for Joe Biden to be the nominee in 2024. There's no question that if he wants to be the nominee, he is the nominee based on the votes that he's won in the primaries. So,
And he
question of
got
the
so much
legitimacy.
done. He got so
Yeah,
much done as president that if we only
he
could do
has.
something about our messaging, that would get out there. I'm going to get cut off pretty soon because
Okay.
this is not normally I have unlimited recording capacity, but in this format we're using, it's not quite so much.
Right.
Let's go back to Larry for a minute. I haven't talked to Larry about politics in a while. Where do you think he was on this, and what has he counseled he feels needs to happen?
Well, Larry was a pragmatic person. I mean, another friend who is speaking at Larry's memorial service tomorrow talked about Larry's dad as an intelligent and practical person. He was a member of the Louisiana Senate. And I think Larry shared those same characteristics. So um, I don't recall having a specific conversation about Larry relative to the 2024 presidential contest, but I think Larry's view was always a pragmatic one, principled, tempered by pragmatism. You don't get to implement your principles if you can't get to the office that enables you to implement them. So you've constantly got to be working toward an outcome that will accomplish the desired result. We had a lot of lunches with Larry, myself, Bill Satoon, Larry's brother Robert. We usually had them around election time, before and after, where we would put our guesses in the hat, and afterwards somebody would eat free. That was frequently Larry. But nobody can predict the future. I would say that a characteristic element of Larry's personality is live in hope and deal with reality. That's about the best we can do. Aspire to greatness and deal with some of the pragmatic choices that it takes to get you there.
I think that is the last word. Closing word. I think that is I think that really does encapsulate his strategy. And if we're going to learn something from him and what he accomplished, it is exactly that. And I say that in a different way. When I said that, I really have been saying that the worse it gets, the better our chances for change is one way of looking at that. And I also call myself a irrational optimist because I don't fully believe in myself as an optimist, but I work at it. David Marcello, we need to talk more, and I really have been trying to figure out. I keep through the newsletter trying to get messages out, and I think that's part of the problem that we've been having is on the messaging side. And let's get it better. Thank you so much. I
Well,
know you've
thank you,
got a
Jeanne.
lot going on.
Fun to talk about a good old friend, and you are one as well.
Exactly.
Take care.
Thank you.